discussion between Sona Wengu and Ulrike Rössler, who talk, I guess, primarily about Sona's work. There will be at the switchover a little bit of time to set up the presentation that Sona has prepared. Otherwise, it's straightforward following the usual procedures. Thank you very much. Thanks for agreeing, by the way, to do this.
Yes,
Busy term.
Well, we thought we'd begin with hieratic because that's a ground base for a lot of what follows, but also a bit about how we met, which was at the 5th hieratic school in Cairo, held at IFAO. And hieratic is really the basis of all Egyptian normal cursive scripts. And an example here gives you a sense of how un-iconic it is, but do you want to take it from there before you explain more about how
absolutely. So first of all, actually, yes, I definitely remember the first time we met, and I remember you unscrolling such a roll, hand copied actually, so shuffle to return. And at the beginning, I would actually only worked in tombs, so with a very different type of material, with a rather more iconic and more detailed type of script. So this was the moment when I started delving more into manuscript culture and starting to be fascinated with the different types of script that are available in ancient Egypt. And again, hieratic is actually the most typical script used by the scribes in ancient Egypt. As you can see, it's very cursive, so it has ligatures, it's not very, let's say, clear, easy to decipher. At least for us, they used to instead really beautifully painted hieroglyphs. So, however, this is not the only type of script that we find in ancient Egypt and that we usually can also find on manuscripts.
And I think a lot of your work has now focused with the Book of the Dead manuscripts on linear hieroglyphs. And do you want to explain to people, and it's all technical, it's all visual, but it underpins all of the research that follows, how that relates?
Yes, so another type of script is precisely instead what we call linear hieroglyphs. They are different from cursive because actually each sign is basically drawn individually. So there are no linear, so no two signs written all together like in our handwriting. Instead, linear hieroglyphs are slightly more iconic. You can pass this around if you want. And Jacob doesn't like it.
We'll be talking about conservation work later.
But anyway, you can already see for yourself that they are slightly more iconic, and each sign is drawn on its own. It can feature more or less like a broad degree of iconicity and of inner detail. But still, usually they are only painted or written in black ink or red ink. So this is the standard color used.
And what I think often passes unnoticed is the different levels of detail in those hieroglyphs.
So even within the same manuscript, for example, here in the Book of the Dead of Ani, if you compare it with the other page going around, you can see that whereas they are still linear hieroglyphs, they present a different amount or let's say quantity of the inner details. And this is just to show that each scribe chooses how many details to include in certain parts of the text of the manuscript, and we will speak more about this later. But usually, the most detailed script is found at the very beginning of the scroll. So the first thing that you would see would be really nicely drawn hieroglyphs, and then as you go on, a bit less care might...
It comes back at the end of
Yes,
our armies, you know I'm obsessed with it.
might be, let's say, applied.
Yeah. And that sort of... So we've got those graphic registers on papyrus.
Exactly.
But your previous work was on tombs, wasn't it? On painted Theban tombs of around the same period as the manuscripts you're now working on. Could you say a bit about how your work on the hieroglyphs and tombs developed and how it fed into this?
Definitely. So for a long time during my PhD, I focused on tomb paleography, and in tombs actually we have a much different type of inscriptions. So instead of written hieroglyphs, we have a really detailed and very iconic hieroglyphs. They are also bigger, of course, than what you could write on a papyrus. And they are usually fully painted, so you really see how each single sign is a small work of art. So, and actually the single hieroglyphs also almost follow the same rules as pictorial representation to some extent. But there is really great variety in the use of the color palette, for example. So there are never two single hieroglyphs the same. And this is very fascinating. And this is something that you would not expect from a manuscript, again, where you normally find only black or red used. However, this is actually where my current project starts, because while I was researching on different types of funerary culture or funerary artifacts in New Kingdom, Egypt, I came across one manuscript that instead features also Polychrome hieroglyphs. So hieroglyphs that are very detailed and written in different paints, which is highly unusual.
Yeah, I remember your first email to me was, do you know any parallels? And I said, well, there's a few, a very small fragment from the painted papyrus from the tomb, from the chapel of the king at Tel El-Amarna, along with the battlefield papyrus. And then I thought, oh no, there's Kenner in Leiden, and it's really built up into quite a substantial but small corpus. And it's the sort of thing everybody goes, oh, that doesn't exist. And when you think it can exist, you find. So do you want to give us some idea of how you built up that corpus and how large it is now and what sort of spread?
Sure. So I wouldn't call it extremely substantial, let's say.
Just compared to when you started.
Compared to the several hundreds of books of the dead that we have, actually at the moment I found only 4 full or completely preserved manuscripts that feature polychrome inscriptions such as this. So you can see the color palette is almost complete. You have yellow here, black and red, and here you can't see the blue, but it's in the other signs here. You can also show this around. So this is very peculiar because it's written actually on what we can define as calfskin, not parchment and not leather. We will delve into this later. But otherwise, actually, only other 3 manuscripts have a full inscription. But it seems as if it's quite a consistent group because they all date to approximately the same period, so 1300 to or 1350 to 1300 BC.
So late 18th dynasty.
Late 18th dynasty, exactly.
Yeah. How wide a social range are those people?
There is a very intriguing question because I've been trying to understand what are the common points between these manuscripts, why only these few manuscripts have such an intriguing characteristic. And one of the first things that I thought was maybe the owners of this manuscript actually have known each other, so I don't know, they had access to the same resources, because this happens in tombs, for example. People were always looking at each other's tombs and saying and finding inspiration. However, it's actually quite varied the social range. So we have people belonging to the really highest echelons of society, really close to the pharaoh even, but we also have other manuscript owners who are simple merchants, which is quite surprising, because, even though maybe also this is an indication of the fact that the merchant had access to certain type of work and again resources.
And the merchants is one of the most extensive.
Exactly. Actually, the book of the Dead of Kenas, who is a merchant, is the one with the longest polychrome or colored inscription of all.
So it can't be tied just to the corpses.
No, it's probably he had the right connections, I would say.
Yes.
That's always my explanation.
Yes. Very good.
As a merchant, you probably know the right, artists.
How many? Where else did you find them apart from in the museum collections? Did you do a lot of other research to build up the corpus? Because that was quite a wide variety, I think.
Yes, well, I went first through this database, the Totenbuch project phone, looking at all the pictures of all the books of the dead.
Many of which are black and white, though, aren't they? Yes.
Exactly.
So no one expects them to be in colours.
Exactly. Actually, this is one of the points of my project. Is actually bringing the attention of the scholar community to the fact that color is an essential element of Egyptian writing. So most of the time, editions of texts only focus on the text, not on how it's written, and almost actually none of the general overviews of writing in the Book of the Dead mention the fact that some are in color. Only your publication, Richard, on AMES mentions, oh yes, there is this one.
And John Taylor's catalogue as well, yeah.
Exactly,
yes,
but otherwise, most overviews of scripts in Book of the Dead, never mention the color.
And that database is fairly complete, isn't it?
Yes, exactly. And that's where I actually even found the references to fragments sold at an auction, because otherwise it would have been impossible to come across such a piece of information. It's amazing, actually, the work that the people of the database did.
Yeah. And what about that? Where is that fragment now? The one that
was sold.
Yes. Is that in a public collection, or is it?
So one was definitely sold. It's probably in private hands. I don't know where it is. Other fragments instead were before in the Gloucestershire library. Yeah. Then they were sold, and now they were acquired by the Houston Museum.
Okay. Yes. Yeah.
So
is the provenance safe?
That is, of course, a question to which the answer is no, I suppose. It's very difficult. That's why I haven't included in my presentation. It's very important to be sure about the provenance of the material you're working with, to be able to make scientific assumptions.
Yeah, it must have left Egypt before the UNESCO
agreement,
at least.
Likely so.
But yes, we don't know much. Yeah. What sort of factors do you think explains the use of colour so exceptionally in so few manuscripts? Quite a few manuscripts, but not many. Yeah. What might have led to this use, would you say? I know you're just half of the way through the postdoc and it's not a finished study, but what lines are you investigating?
So first of all, there seems to be at least a consistent use of Polychrome inscription at the very beginning of the scroll. So I think this is one of the hints that tell us that it was probably a way to really attract the attention of the person as soon as they opened the scroll. Our eye as humans is usually attracted automatically by anything that is not conform to the norm. So if you open a roll, sorry, not a scroll, and you expect something black or red, and instead you find a really colorful inscription, that would have definitely been a sort of eye-catcher and a way to really underscore the effort put into this manuscript and show that this is different from all the others. It's a manufacture of a certain degree of let's say, prestige.
Mm. Do you think it's
and
just expense, or were there other cultural factors?
There are, of course, other cultural factors that probably connect this, the effort probably to connect the manuscript with the normal arena of Polychrome hieroglyphs, which would have been actually tomb decoration. So I think there is, to some extent, the wish to transform the page into a monumental scene. In fact, the Polychrome inscription always features in the vignette of the Adoration of Osiris, which is something that we usually find typically in tomb decoration, and it's not original to the Book of the Dead itself. It's something that actually already comes from the monumental discourse.
Yeah. I'm thinking of the Book of Kenna, where it's worked very spectacularly. That's also meant the papyrus has always been on display in Leiden, which means, of course, it's very badly damaged by light. Could you say a bit about the work you've done with conservators at the British Museum in relation to the project and with our students here as well?
Absolutely. So thank you for this question, because it's actually something that I've been working now a lot on. So pigments, how writing techniques and painting techniques, and how these aspects are essential actually to understanding the production of the manuscript itself. So I've been trying to understand exactly the paints used for these inscriptions. And because actually there is one element that is very peculiar. So so I've said that the Polychrome inscriptions features almost a full color palette, but this is not completely true. So it's almost full, but one pigment specifically is never found in manuscripts, at least in the text, and that is green. And that is something that really surprised me, because even though the other colors are all used almost exactly the same way as they are used for hieroglyphs in tomb, the absence of green is really peculiar. And so I've been trying to discuss this very intensively with all the conservators that came on my path. And apparently there are some elements in the production of the color green that might have hindered writing with it. So green and blue, Egyptian green and blue are actually the oldest artificial pigments of humanity. So they are really the first artificial pigments created, and they necessitate of a very long procedure. They are copper based, and they need to be fired at higher than 800 degrees, etc. And they are very grainy in consistency. So this might have been one of the reasons why specifically green, which is also a bit more difficult to achieve than blue, might have been avoided in the text, because it is probably okay, right? Let's say painting the vignettes on or bigger surfaces, but it's probably not that easy to write simple or thin lines with it.
And green would be filling in details
exactly.
of the song. But there is another factor.
Yes, it's also very difficult to have a stable pigment. So green can be very unstable, and sometimes it can burn through the papyrus. So through the support. We don't know to what extent ancient Egyptian writers or artists would have been aware of this, but maybe to some extent.
In the end, as you know, you pull out papyri and there's just a hole in the papyrus where the green pigment would be. And also, and what term would you use for that sort of the darkness around those holes? The sort of the shadow.
So
yes.
Halo.
Yes.
So that's the first stage basically. First it becomes black, and it creates a black halo around the green. So you can see it here, for example, in the figure of the god Osiris. And afterwards it really just self-combusts and leaves a hole.
Yes, it's not.
Which is, but I mean, it's difficult to understand exactly to what this is due, but conservators say that it might have also been connected to the level of humidity.
The big question is when would that damage take place? Has it taken place in the tomb, which seems unlikely given they're dry,
Exactly.
in the museum, which I'd hope not. But so were the scribes aware that this was a risk with green pigment?
I don't think so too much, but
Explain what they
avoided it
specifically
for small surfaces.
Yes, yeah. I wonder whether you could find books of the dead where you could see that the damage had occurred while they were still rolled. That at least would show it was ancient. No, it's it's very bizarre, that absence of green, though. I think it's not paralleled in Theban tomb paintings at all.
Actually, no.
So it's
but it's interesting because they find scribes find actually different ways to go around this problem. So instead of painting the signs blue, for example, they fill it with yellow, or they just write it in black. So, and this shows how versatile scribes are, and they are really able to switch from one medium to the other, always also adapting it to the different circumstances.
So you've got lots of different ways of dealing with this thing.
Exactly.
And your thinking at the moment is that it's really monumentality.
Exactly.
Is what they're trying to. Could you say a bit more about how that concept is being mobilized here?
Absolutely. So the idea is that exactly as there are instances of tomb walls written in instead linear hieroglyphs. So we have many examples of tomb walls which somehow mirror the style of manuscripts. The idea is that in this case, instead, it's the manuscript which is trying to mirror the style, let's say, of a tomb decoration. And this is what I'm tentatively defining as monumentalization. So trying to turn normally mobile support into a monumental support. So that's how I'm defining my monumentalization. And actually, this is not the only way that scribes of manuscripts have at their disposal to monumentalize certain passages, but what I've discovered until now is that there are so many different options. So there is really a huge range of possibilities. So it starts. One is precisely using the Polychrome hieroglyphs. But however, you can also simply use fully painted hieroglyphs, which is another layer of, let's say, monumentality. And otherwise, you can also monumentalize the first page also by using linear hieroglyphs, but with many inner details. So the conclusion at the moment is that the importance of the first sheet is really constantly underscored by using what strategy the scribe feels or deems suitable in each context.
It's really aiming at the market and the reader,
exactly.
The viewer. In terms
attracting really. So it's exactly like our cover pages. Everybody has probably bought once in their life a book just for their cover. I do it all the time. So I think this is really a design strategy adopted by the scribes, because there is this sort of understanding that manuscripts in ancient Egypt, funerary manuscripts specifically, were produced in stock, not always of course, but to some extent they were produced in stock, so they were to be sold to anybody who needs it. And we also know that people were probably showing it around their peers and their family members. So it would have really shown the care taken into acquiring, or maybe the taste of the manuscript owner into acquiring a prestigious manuscript.
And you mentioned publication.
Oh yes.
In effect, yes. What publications will come out of this study, do you hope?
So aside from the monograph, of course, that's what is to be expected. I'm planning to basically release the manuscript of Nacht also online digitally. I mean, the pictures are already available on the British Museum website. But however, my goal is to create a platform to scroll through the manuscript and also, for example, zoom on the single Polychrome hieroglyphs and also make available comparisons from tomb decoration and from other manuscripts. And this is really to also give viewers an idea of how colorful Egyptian writing is and how essential it is to also look at all these different aspects and put it into the broader visual context of the time.
I think what's wonderful about the project has been, it's been a weird little footnote up to now, and suddenly these oddities turn out to be really quite substantial. There's quite a few papyri, and in your analysis they're also fitting in as part of a general approach to written culture, as opposed to being
and
something
also to
bizarre and
visual
sensitive.
culture.
Yes,
because I think the take-home message here is just that whereas usually we as Egyptologists tend to always categorize artifacts. There is a beautiful word in Swiss German which is a Schubladisieren, which means like putting it, I don't know if you understand it, but it means like putting everything in a drawer. So so I think it's important to look at visual and written culture as a continuum in a sense, and not to just study one single object category as always separated from the other, because that's...
I'd say amen to that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.